you're on TikTok, Twitter,
Yeah.
YouTube.
Not on YouTube.
YouTube? No, not on YouTube.
Yeah.
Twitch, TikTok, Twitter. Anything else? Insta?
Instagram, yeah, a little bit. It's like it's more of a personal thing, right? Like
Yeah.
follow me if you want to follow me, but it's a lot of like personal content.
Yeah. Now, tell me, as someone who's trying to, please help me out. As someone who's trying to maybe dip their toes into TikTok, what would you say is the defining feature of TikTok content?
You get well, it's I'm hesitating because when I'm thinking back of my favorite TikTok videos, there's no form, there's no format. So it's like it's really just if people like it, they like it, right? No, but I think it's like understanding the medium a little bit more, because I know that if I don't start something on TikTok, like a moment that reels people in within the first 2 seconds, it's like nobody's gonna watch that video. It's scroll past.
Yeah.
If it's like low beat on Twitter, at least like you're probably already following me. You can see that the video is like 30 seconds, and there's a little bit more room to play with. So in my Twitter videos, they don't immediately start with a hook or something's happening. You know what I mean? So I said that was like my first thing. And again, I have yet to be super prolific on TikTok. It's a lot more of the consumption and the learning. But I think that's like another core aspect of it. But I think much like any other platform, man, it's like a lot of my friends who are very successful on TikTok are just like very niche oriented. So they have like maybe 80% of their videos are like a same type of video. So therefore people would follow them to get that content. But then 20% of their videos are kind of just like, yeah, you mess around and whatnot. But I think that's natural for any for any platform,
Right.
any social platform.
Would I be correct in assuming that TikTok videos maybe have a lower bar for entry in terms of quality of footage, like technical quality of footage and sound and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's the beauty about TikTok. As somebody who loves like film, like remember the Vine? I don't even know if you were on Vine, to be
I
honest
do
with
know
you.
what it is. I do know what it is, but that's about as far as
When
it
you
goes.
said yeah, exactly. No. Like I loved Vine back in the day as well, but it was like the beauty of these platforms is that they're so low budget. Some of the like million plus views on TikTok are just like really janky, low budget stuff, right? And when I say low budget, I mean like there's no color grading, there's no smart editing, it's just like raw, natural video content and creative video content, which is what I love about TikTok. You can start to see that like there are niches of TikTok that are like a bit higher quality, a little bit more produced. But as for now, like that's not the quality that people like to consume on that platform, right? It should be more natural, more conversational. I know a weird thing that I've been noticing is that some people do like gameplay, they review a game, for example, on TikTok. And on YouTube, you would want to screen record the game, you would want to have specific clips, or it would just be natural on your computer. On TikTok, I noticed that a lot of like big TikTok creators who do game reviews or whatever have you, they record it on their phone, like this game on their phone. So you can see a little bit of their screen, a little bit of their background, whilst like as the
Ah.
clips. So it's like it's such a fascinating thing where I don't know where the conclusion is about this point or what it's supposed to say about social media, but it's an interesting observation of like you purposely lower the quality expectation to get just a larger viewer base. But maybe there's something to do with like relatability there, where like Instagram prioritizes beautiful, very clean cut kind of content, and the types of art that they want on that platform, when TikTok doesn't, right? And that's the stuff that they might prioritize. So there's such an interesting if you're not on TikTok already, Porter, just start filming. Start filming a bunch of random stuff, cut it
Yeah.
together. I'm sure you can salvage something out of it. That's why I feel like it's a lot more natural to the stuff that you would potentially make on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's interesting. I what you said about it not being, if people don't like it in the first 2 seconds, then they're done. I feel like YouTube's like that, but you get a minute.
Yes.
I feel like you get a minute on YouTube. 30, maybe 30 seconds even, but you get more than 2 seconds.
Yes.
Um,
You get like 10 seconds on Twitter, for example, right? Like,
yeah,
yes, you're right. They're different bar area.
different bar, but people's attention is people's attention there's so much competing for people's attention. And that's one of the struggles I've had in general, just almost ideologically, as a someone who's tried to create on YouTube, is the me becoming a little more aware of the fact that, okay, this is a thing, you do need to compete for attention, and you can't just assume that people are gonna, like, by virtue of, well, maybe it gets good, give you 5 minutes. Like, that's just not gonna happen. Like, but then knowing that the type of things that I value often are slow burns, there's this thing where it's like, ah, shit, I have to kind of do a thing that I not necessarily don't value, but a thing that kind of is different to how I would approach it were I untethered, which can sometimes lead to, like, I don't want to become this sensationalist hype man. But it's definitely doable, and I think you find, like, a subtle way. Like, I think I'm in the process of slowly learning that, and slowly learning how to maintain engagement. I know through my analytics that 60% of people dip from my videos in the first minute. They just do. And they just go bonk. And the people that stay tend to stay the whole fucking video.
Yes.
Like, it's really interesting. And I imagine that's the case for probably people who do it more successfully. It's less of a drop at the start, but, like, there's still a drop and then this consistency. And so TikTok videos are a minute. Can they be a minute, or is it less than a minute?
Yeah, less than a minute. I think there's a format where you could go slightly longer than a minute.
TikTok epic 2.3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that typically your videos are like less than a minute. You know what I mean? That's what you would typically edit for. 30 seconds as well.
Yeah.
7 seconds. I know, like, a lot of people joke about 7 second TikTok videos are ones that blow up.
That's fantastic.
But I think, like, you bring up something so interesting, because it's like, how many people, when you're talking about growing on a platform, right? Whether it be Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, there are certain formats for people that stream or game, or, like, the routes that you could pursue of the type of content that people usually consume. I feel like when you mentioned just now about how do you put your spin on it, it kind of gets into this conversation of, do you change your personality and the type of persona on these according to platforms? Because that's also something that I struggle with, because I know you're a lot more prolific on YouTube, for example. Is your persona on your YouTube videos, maybe, like, through these pieces of content, different than the type of persona that you are on Twitch? And I'm only asking this because I feel like we've quasi had this conversation in the past, but now farther into the content journey, is that something that you are even conscious of, or do you think about?
Yeah, a little bit. My relationship with YouTube has been an interesting one. Well, let me first answer your question rather than going off on now let me talk 40 minutes about my YouTube channel. Yes, it is different. It's different because it is me engaged in a dialogue with an imaginary audience. Not to say that nobody watches it, but I don't know specifically who's watching it. And so it's me. I find I perform more for myself on YouTube. I do more the gags that I think are funny. I don't think I'm more myself, but I'm a more myself for myself.
Interesting.
As opposed to, X, Y, and Z are in chat right now. Bang, bang, bang. Here's the things. Here's some in-jokes with them. And I think that I am a little... I guess I get less salty. Even when things happen, just because I know I can edit it out and stuff. I tend to be calmer. I find it harder to begin recording for like Let's Plays and stuff like that. To get into that mode, it's more of a, like, oh, okay. But the me that is engaged in, I guess, a dialogue there is... more part of like a product of a series, you know, like there's the content voice and there's the content which is determined by who I'm speaking with, you know, at the time. But it's in the context of knowing that I've done this whole content thing and it sort of has led, conversations have led me to this point, I guess. Then there's the Let's Plays, which are within a really specific context, you know, Deadly Premonition, for example, there's jokes and bits that only work if you've watched from the start. As opposed to me being like, hey, new people that have come in, this is what I've been doing, and da 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 da. There's an assumption in that content that these are the people that have like for some reason held on for fucking 15 episodes and are still watching it, you know. So I really feel this like almost imaginary bond with this sort of nebulous group, especially towards the, you know, as I get towards the end of one of these things, like that they have come through this sort of bizarre journey with me, as opposed to on stream where it might be, oh, this is my final stream of this game. I've done 10, 20 streams of it. Bunch of people have been here for parts of it. There's a bunch of people I know from elsewhere who've come in and like, oh, you know, like maybe a streamer friend comes in, oh, how's it been going? Great to see you. And so there is more of a hangout vibe with the game as a backdrop, as opposed to we hang out really through the game and experience the game and go through more of a journey through the game on YouTube, if you know what I mean.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I value those reflections so much, right? Because I think this is a question for kind of every content creator who's thinking about putting stuff on different platforms as well. And this is like, I feel like this is more some of the things that I've been much more fascinated by for people that are in content. Because I mean, to build off of your introspection there, which I love the analogy of you have this imaginary group that's following you through the journey. They are probably picking up on everything, and you can speak more to them even though you don't know if they actually exist or not, right? But it makes you feel a lot more at ease. I think that's such a fascinating a fascinating thing that you would do as somebody who creates content. But on my side, I mean, let me share with you my biggest fear as somebody who makes content is that what if somebody only consumes my streams? Will they understand the person that I am, or maybe the things, you know, other dimensions of me that don't exist on Twitch, for example, you know? Or if you only follow my tweets, you know, do you see the other parts of, you know, stuff that I really want to put out there on the internet, but only exist on Twitch, you know? And to give you like an example of that, it's like, on Twitch, it's like we talk a lot about, you know, we do some serious conversations sometimes, but it's a lot about funny moments, bashing on each other, entertainment pieces and whatnot here and there, and like just having a much more natural, like you said, hanging out, have a good time, laugh, that kind of energy. But what I really love and what I really think like I want to do with my content is put like, I don't know, some thought-provoking content around like industry items, you know, how I personally work with a lot of Southeast Asian developers, like, you know, with a lot of my content, right? It's like, do I feel like people understand that I'm actually in it to talk about macro industry trends, to talk about what it means to be have cultural representation in video game development and whatnot, right? When all they're consuming is just the funny clips that I put on TikTok. You know, it's like, so that's my biggest fear as a content creator. It's like, I know not everybody's gonna watch every single one of your YouTube videos from start to finish, right? Or they're gonna follow you on Twitch, on Twitter, on all these things and get the whole picture. I just like, for some weird reason, that terrifies me. I don't know if that's justified or if that's rational, but I feel like I built off of or that reminded me of the things that you were reflecting on just now when it comes to like your imaginary YouTube audience now.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's justified. I don't know if terror is the justifiable emotion, but I think concern and being aware of it, you know. I have experienced similar things. There was a video that I really worked on so much without ever releasing on YouTube, which I worked on it harder than any other YouTube video, and I just said, you know, I can't do this. I wrote a big piece, and it was probably would have been about an 8-9 minute video after editing, and it was me reflecting on video games wasting your time. and it was sort of a side of the ultimate. Ultimately, I didn't release it because I was like, who is this person that's now dropping this in between being a guy that has a wall of shame, and like, how did Jekyll and Hyde connect there? You know, me trying to, it was this really, I thought, serious, not sure, the title's a little clickbaity, are video games a waste of time? But that's what it was about, and it was a serious reflection on just some of the things I've noticed in gaming that's like that just try to hold your attention and keep you playing and playing and playing and playing and playing, and then just having an honest conversation with myself about whether that's valuable for me and whether that might be valuable for other people, and trying to look at arguments saying, well, this is why video games are a waste of time, and then be looking at, well, this is why anything's a waste of time, and then sort of it was something I was quite passionate about, and I thought it'd be a really interesting piece. And in the end, I'm just like, I don't know how this fits. Who watches this? Like, I thought maybe the content audience watched this, but then I'm like, but maybe people have seen this guy gaming and playing fucking games that might be argued as some of the longest games ever. Like, who's this guy now saying it might be a waste of time? Like, what is that? And so, yeah, I've been concerned about that as well. You know, like, who you perceive yourself to be versus who you're perceived as, and not even on an egotistical level, but on a trying to get a project to succeed kind of level. Yeah, it's a tricky one to navigate. Yeah, it really is.
It's just so flipping interesting to me, because like everybody keeps saying, so you should be yourself on content, like make sure you're authentic or whatever have you. But it's, yeah, you're right, it's not this authenticity where you're making up a character and you're like Dr. Disrespect, and this is like a bit that you're doing as a YouTuber versus a Twitch streamer or whatever have you. It's a lot more nuanced than that, right? Like you said, it's not about, oh, I want this video to have, like, I want my next TikTok video to blow up as much as my friend's TikTok's videos, right? It's more so like, yeah, I'm putting time and effort into this. I would like, to put it out there and be very satisfied with it, but also have other people interact with it, to a certain extent. So I think you're totally right. And I think I just can't imagine how many times other content creators are sitting on drafts of, like, in my case, there's a lot of drafts of tweets where I just feel like it doesn't jive with the rest of the content that I put out on Twitter, so I'm afraid of doing that. Or I can't imagine how many stream ideas people might have that they're probably not pursuing because of the same thing, or YouTube video ideas or other types of it. Just, I think it's more of a fascinating thing. Or like, as content creators, are we also our own worst enemy, whereby we don't pursue a lot of maybe risque, more so from a personal side, like creative projects, because we think social media platforms are supposed to, or these types of contents are supposed to be consumed by a specific group of people, or are supposed to be presented in a specific kind of way. I think that conversation is a lot more interesting, whereby you want to grow on a platform, you want to be authentic, but then should you throw out the format? Should you throw format out the window sometimes to truly pursue something a lot more intrinsically creative or original? Or is that too, like, are you putting that burden or that filter on yourself?
Yeah, and I guess you never really know until it's been tested, and then you might not even know because maybe you have to test things more than once.
Yeah, that's another thing, right?
I think there's a dichotomy here. Ladies and gentlemen, we've discovered a dichotomy. There is, are you an artist or are you a business? And the artist shouldn't be afraid. The successful artist, in my opinion, shouldn't be afraid to pursue anything short of, like, hurting people in the name of what it is they're trying to discover, or the path they're trying to go down as a creative individual, as someone who's trying to make something that matters, that has some kind of lasting value in the world, or just to discover for themselves, something about themselves through it. The business, on the other hand, could give you some really compelling reasons not to do some of those things. Some really compelling arguments, like maybe that might be a fucking disaster for you, that it will take a very long time for you to recover from that. And obviously, I'll speak for myself. Obviously, the stakes from an external perspective are like, I'm not paying for my entire life with this thing I'm doing. So what is the cost really? But then there's also the cost of how much time you've put into it and the effort you've put into something, that it does feel like a kind of for me, it's a combination of the two. It's a creative business, and both of those energies are tugging. It's a tug of war between the two, and it's hard to know where exactly it lands, and when to listen to the creative side and when to listen
Yeah.
to the business side. And would you say that you listen to one more than the other?
No, I think it's hard to, because I was thinking as well where I fit in that ecosystem. I think I do sit in the middle a little bit more, right? Like I'm very attentive to, how do you make a Twitter video, like I said, a little bit more, how do you engage people via Twitter, maybe get new audience members or people interact with your content that way. So in my in my perception, that is a lot of like the businessy side of things, like metrics, growing the viewership, rather than like I'm gonna spend 6 hours doing this like new wave, I don't know, Twitter clip video thing that nobody's gonna watch, but it means so much to me, right? Um, no, so I think I sit in the middle. I don't know if I don't know. It's just like it's a weird part of me where sometimes I feel like a lot of people respect people who can do both, whereby if you know how to play the business game, which is a very surface level business, you're not talking about like yeah, something on a much more technical level, but I feel like there's just a lot of respect for content creators who know how to be true to themselves, make the art that they want to pursue, but are also able to, yeah, grow their content as a business, right? Or work with external parties, which I guess by proxy could mean a little bit more business oriented engagements or whatever have you. So that is always at my mind, where it's like the people that I tend to respect are people that do that, but also just like I feel like the general internet zeitgeist, whenever you see somebody who's like, oh, I got a sponsorship from Elgato, it's like, oh, you probably know it's because they have great content, they have a great community, they're probably super true to themselves, but they know how to, leverage on those kinds of things.
Mm.
Where so that's where I think like that's where a lot of people perceive value in content creators, or maybe that's a way for society to, externally or value content creators who aren't just doing art on the internet, right? Rather than just calling them artists. So I think that's a whole another wave or another mist of this conversation. But to be honest with you, I don't know, man. It's like I think there's a beauty in treating things as a business. I think there's a beauty in treating things as a pure artist, right? But where do you think you get your personal get from? Because I always feel so conflicted sometimes. Like for example, when I work with developers to highlight games, um, as like I said, for those that don't know, I love highlighting Southeast Asian games. I work with developers and publishers, and like that for me, it's like, oh, when a tweet engagement gets really high, I feel really happy because that's only not only deliverable for the game developers, but it's like, oh cool, I know people are valuing this, but it's also a business side of things. So
Mm.
that's where I get that. But then sometimes like I know a Twitter video gets like very, very low views, but I'm so proud of that edit or like what that video is supposed to mean or say or whatever have you. So like I get so much pleasure out of that as well. Um, I don't know that it's such a balance. Do you feel in some, are there pieces of content that you put out that yeah, that you get very, very low metrics on, but you feel so incredibly deeply proud of and very happy? Or does it sway the other way a little bit more on a metric side of things?
I would say on Twitch, my perception of how things went tends to be more results based, simply because maybe not in the moment, but in hindsight, simply because, and by results I mean how many people were there. That's really the only result I look to ultimately, is how many people were there, not how many follows I got, not how many subs I got, how many people were watching. And
Do you define watching really quick? Do you define people were there by watching or by people interacting?
the two are connected. I find it's obviously you can have 40 people watching and it be quiet, and you can have 10 people watching and it's going off. But I tend to feel like the interaction kind of keeps the numbers up in terms of people watching. Like I, I find that when there's the lulls, that's when things slowly like, and you're gonna have them. You're going to
Yeah.
have them, but I'm not sure how to avoid them. I think that's just the natural way of things. But I tend to view it's rare that I look back upon a stream and go, oh, that went really well. And I felt really good about how this bit went and that bit went. It's rare that I look back and it wasn't a good stream in terms of the amount of people viewing as well. Like my perception of those and I don't know if it's me being influenced by looking back upon the numbers first, but I don't think so. Like, there's been one or two where I've been really grumpy and the numbers have gone off, and I'm like, what the hell's that about?
That's just me dropping 5 subs every single time you die in Dark Souls or something like
Ah!
that. You know, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Conversely, on YouTube, and obviously these are the only two things that I can really talk about because they're the only two things I use right now. I have made. There's been some edits of a let's play. There's been some episodes of content where I've been like, I really liked that conversation. I thought that was a really good conversation. I'm happy with what the person brought. I'm glad I didn't fuck it up too much, and that will happen before me seeing the results. And afterwards, I'll go, oh, it was a bit lower than usual with the views, and people didn't like it that much. But I'll go, okay, I still thought it was good, and I'm still happy. I'm still happy with that content. So I think there's a bit of a difference. And like, I'm also I'm currently doing a let's play that hasn't garnered a ton of traction, but I'm committed to finishing it. And I've basically my recording, I'm like 1 or 2 episodes off finishing it anyway. I'm committed to finishing it because I don't want to get a reputation for not finishing shit. And I do it still trying, but knowing that it's not going to get much traction anyway, and I can still be proud of like, oh, that was a good episode. I liked that I did this new thing, and I liked that it went here, and I liked that it was succinct or this or that. So, yeah, there's a difference between the two, and I would say that I do think probably more businessy Twitch, probably more arty or creatively YouTube. Or there's a slight lean towards either side on those respective
That's really
platforms.
interesting. Yeah. That's really interesting. Again, I love this because I can't. This is if I could have a dream questionnaire, right, of surveying people in their content creation journeys. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I've been asking you would be on that dream questionnaire. It's like, how much do you self-doubt yourself, right? Or like, do you have different personas on different on different platforms, or even this, right? Where do you stand between the pure creative side versus the business side? I think like it makes people so much more informed, because I feel like as people who make content, again, the fear of only seeing one side of a person, that might stymie you from even understanding that they might be thinking of those relationships on the back end a little bit more, right? Or seeing more dimension behind people's characters. So I don't know what that says about me, where like it's like the same thing of movies, right? You don't just want to know the actor. I know some of my friends, like, they know actors who play these specific roles and they only care about the roles that they play. But for me, it's like, oh yeah, did you know, like, in their personal lives, they're actually very passionate about this niche thing, and like that's the reason why they chose to play this character or whatever have you. It's like getting deeper to know artists, right? And by artists, I mean like it could be on the celebrity part, but also just like as streamers, as people, like I have probably just have like that weird fixation of, if you're putting content out there, you've got to be a deeply interesting person, right? Like you've got to have.
I'm not so sure about that. No. I think on some level, I think I agree. I think if you're people who are really passionate about it and continue trying to do it,
yes,
I would agree with, and that's regardless of success or not success, in my opinion.
Well, I guess like that's another one I just wanted to quickly run by you on a general observation. Just I don't know if you have data that backs this up, of the people that maybe you've had on content, or people that you've co-streamed with, or people that you watch on Twitch or whatever have you. How many people do you think that don't pursue regular content anymore? You know what I mean? On a numbers thing.
Well, I've thought about this a lot. I think I was chatting with, I might have been chatting with Blue about it. I was looking back at some people that are some people I knew in the past. I'm like, what happened to them? And they're gone,
Yeah.
and they're gone. As a number, if I would put a percentage on it, uh, of people that let's say a year ago, um, or let's say when we last spoke, I would say probably 40 to 50% have sort of stopped. Um, yeah, I'd probably lean towards about 50% of the people who were kind of committed to it for like a period of a few months or more. And there's people who I've seen who were technically doing, I don't know if they're putting out better content, but I guess if you go by results, they were like, who was probably getting better metrics than I was. Who I was like, oh damn, they're doing really well, but I've seen some of them disappear as well. Which goes to show that there's a lot of steps you kind of got to get to really feel that that it might be a permanent thing. I would say 50%. What about you?
Yeah, I would say 40 to 50. That was almost because again, I was reflecting on this a couple of days ago as well when, it came to like, oh, I've been on this platform for about a year and a half. I have so many friendships and whatnot. Where it's
Mm,
like, and again, not I think there's niches as well under those subcategories where like they just disappear off the face of the earth and like you have no idea how they're doing. And other people, it's like, oh, I know they've got a lot going on in life and it's just like an interim period for them, which is again
yes.
totally justified. And then others who like they're still very active in still very active in other people's chats or they're interacting with content but they don't personally make that much content anymore.
Yep.
So I don't know, I feel like major respect for those that stay consistent, and I'm not the most consistent person out there, but it seems like it's such a huge thing for people that are making content on the internet. Just like, how do you stay consistent? What is what is that time where you would just drop off and not exist from a content perspective anymore? Because it's so rampant. It seems like it happens to so many people.
Well, and there's a lot of effort required. I think there's different levels of effort. There's no effort required if you just want to pop the camera on and be like, hey guys, what's up? There's just a little bit of social effort, I guess. But there is, people who are sort of, let's say, taking it a step further in what they want to achieve with it. And of that, there's levels to it. There's a lot of upkeep and work required in that, and you might enjoy the work. The work hopefully is enjoyable for everyone who does it, but it's still work. And I think there is a group of people who get to a point and they go, "Wow, I've put in this much work for that result. What?" And suddenly it becomes like, well, fuck this, man. I need to like, I got to get ahead in life. Like, I should be putting this time elsewhere. I got to be putting it into something academic. I got to be putting it into something where I get a salary. I got to be putting it into something where I can feel that I've got almost a guarantee of things going well eventually if I put in X thousand hours of work. So I think that category of person who sort of it's more than just turn on the stream. And I would say we're both that. Now, there's probably within that, there's a whole hierarchy of
Yeah,
how much more do you do. And I'd put myself somewhere in the lower middle of that. But
I agree. Yeah, same. I'm for myself, for the record.
yeah, but
Yeah, yeah,
there is more. There is more to it, right? There's thought behind it. It's a project that's multifaceted, and you're aiming towards constant improvement. And I'm sure hoping for growth, both internally and externally.
yeah,
Um, so the question that comes to my mind with that is, having done this for over a year and a half now, Arief, and gone through what you've gone through, and the highs and lows, and the creamy medium. Um, do you view this as something that's going to be in your life long term? Is this an experiment still for you? What sort of role does it have in your life now?
yeah. Like phenomenal piece of meat that we're gonna touch on here, I guess. Yeah, I think it always started as a side project, right? Much like many other people that we probably know. Start it by the side, grow it if it works out, or sometimes it's also just like a creative release that you want to do on a regular basis, whatever have you. Yeah, I think so. I like I've done this too long to just not stream anymore. Like, look, don't get me wrong, I keep talking about this particular thing all the time, but major respect to anybody who's making consistent regular content
Yeah.
when they have a bunch of other life commitments, right?
Oh
Like that,
yeah.
that this is not your full-time thing. Not to say that being a full-time content creator is a lot easier. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But just in terms of like, look, people who have kids, people who have a job, people who, maybe just are moving places, like a certain somebody on this platform, right? Like, or on this particular call, major respect to those people, because I feel like that's the most challenging thing. But I think for me, it's like, yes, I've done too much to stop, and also I feel like I'm just getting started. Whereby it's always that experimentation phase. And look, every new streamer you connect with, I'm sure there's got to be some form of creative idea that you could pursue together down the line. That's how I approach new connections as well. Or maybe also on the professional side of things, like I've worked with a bunch of studios and a bunch of developers whereby, yeah, we do a specific type of project together. What are like the 10 other projects that we could do together
Mm,
as well? And all the connections that I've made on Twitter or other kind of social platforms as well. It's like I feel very like I'm still fresh to the content creation ecosystem, the gaming, more developer oriented ecosystem as well. That it's only up from here, but it all is personally tied, right? Like I know if I spend a lot more time on content, I could pursue a lot more projects or find what works and what doesn't. So that's what energizes me more, right? Like, yeah, sure, maybe I edited a bad TikTok video and it didn't go anywhere, but that's just the start, man. Think about like if I keep doing that, it's like I just feel so much more motivated with every day that goes by.
mm,
But the only thing that really is stopping is like time or effort or other obligations that are not content oriented. So that's where I personally feel, which I think is a very good place to be in. But I also don't want to be complacent whereby you have those dreams for so long, but you don't pursue any of them. I think
yeah.
that's also what I'm afraid of. But yeah, maybe that's just my dumb optimistic mentality. But that's really where I sit in, you know, over the past year and a half, especially.
I don't think it's dumb. And I think optimism is extremely useful. As long as it's coupled with a good sense of expectation management. Um, you know what I mean? I actually think a lot of issues, regardless of ambition, a lot of personal issues may arise, and I can speak from some experience, but I think without making too much of a bold leap, I can attribute that to a lot of other streamers as well.
Mm.
Is expectation management. Putting in, if I do all these things, then this should happen. When I do all these things, that's going to happen. This has been happening, so this will continue to happen.
Yeah.
And it just
Oh,
doesn't
I
always
agree.
go that way. And
Absolutely.
and and sometimes you go, oh, why is it the thing that I worked on harder gets less than the thing that I just jumped out of bed and did? Like what the hell is that about? And what lessons are those? And I think you mentioned before that, and I do agree. Big respect to everybody who's balancing this with other commitments, right? Um, and career, family, like you said. Uh, an interesting thing is that, in a way, I think that adds time constraints and effort constraints, big time, to what people can actually achieve. But there is a positive to those situations as well, where I think a lot of the pressure is taken off, and I think some of the expectation management, like if you like work on this video that you think's the shit and you expect it to be here and then it's there, if you're earning, doing a job, earning enough to like have a reasonable life on the side, or sorry, as the main piece of your pie, that might be like, damn. But like if that's your whole
Yeah.
shit, that's really a blow. That's a real
Yeah.
blow. And I think some of those, I think it can be maybe psychologically a little harder for those who are in it full time. And I'm actually really looking forward to the next. I'm envisioning the next phase of my streaming life, because I think like you that it's kind of a part of my life now, and for better or worse, and I'm looking at a real shift for me, something probably closer to where you're at right now, where as opposed to getting little side gigs in my little English teaching biz during the evening and getting a little coin on that and then streaming during the day, I'm flipping it around now and we'll be doing back to conventional daytime 9 to 5-ish, 9 to 4-ish kind of work, and then streaming nights. And part of me is, I'm actually very excited about it. Like I look forward to those changes, but I'm also very aware that like, oh man, I'm gonna be tired. Like it's gonna be there's gonna be times where I'm just like, man, I'm tired as fuck. Like I see it a lot with people that stream nights, that they're like, they get 3 hours in and they're just like, I gotta go to bed, guys. I'm out.
I mean, I think on that side, I'm so like knowing you for as long as that I've known you, which is like in retrospect not too long, right? But I feel like it's on the longer side of internet relationships
Oh
that
yeah.
I've had. But it's yeah, I think you nailed it. It's like entering different phases of content creation, and that's what I mean when, again, there's no part of me that says like, oh, people who don't do content on a consistent basis aren't, like, they weren't in it full, their head wasn't in it or they didn't want to do. It's like, no, like people go through different phases in life, and like if content is like probably a part of that, right? So I can't wait to see this type of stuff that you put out as well, especially if you're committed to making content, because I do think you make great content as well that I feel very engaged with. But it's like, how do you balance those things and knowing where your limits are? I know it's we've talked a lot more about the dips, or how do you manage expectations like you mentioned, or I feel like a bunch of stuff so far in this conversation that's been like, yeah, there's a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of the negatives, or a lot of the under the dirty underbelly of content creation as well, right? But I think another piece of huge motivation that I will never be, I'm always a very thankful person, especially on stream, and I know you are. A part of like the early content that you put out that I respected so much was that when people came in, you genuinely thanked them for hanging out with you. Because it's a crazy thing that people want to spend 2 hours of their day, 3 hours of their day watching just you on screen playing a video game, for example, right? So I love that you've always had that tone. But I think for me, it's like the reason why I am committed to content in the long term is like, do you know how much this has given me in the past year? Which is a very sad way, both a very happy and sad way of framing things. Like I play Final Fantasy 14 consistently with 2 friends of ours that I've met in real life, but and somebody that I haven't. But those are relationships that only exist due to Twitch.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, and we're really good friends. It's August and Care, by the way, that we play Final Fantasy 14. But it's like my consistent Final Fantasy 14 time would not exist if I wasn't making content on this platform, and those friendships wouldn't exist on that platform, right? There are people that I interact with on Twitter where, again, I've probably gotten to know people in the more game dev industry side of things, or made friendships and relationships there that wouldn't have existed if I didn't stream on Twitch. There are people that message me on Discord, or people that send me TikTok videos, that all those things would be gone from my life, or wouldn't have existed in my life if I didn't do this whole content journey. So like, despite all the trials and tribulations with Twitch, I can't imagine going back to a normal non-content oriented lifestyle if there are so many positives and so many new relationships and meaningful relationships that I've made via this social platform. And I don't mean like networking and connecting with people about like collaborating someday or doing one-off streams or whatever. I mean like meaningful relationships and people that you like genuinely have grown to respect and gotten to know. So I don't know, on the positive side of things, like that is what content creation I think also gives you, other than maybe starting a small business or growing your metrics or whatever have you, just like meeting some really, really great people.
Well, I think that's the real kicker of Twitch. That's Twitch. That's the best of Twitch there, and I can agree with everything you've said through my own experience. I thought about that. I thought leaving for me, like I'm physically leaving, as I've explained ad nauseum at every single possible opportunity. So people are sick and tired of fucking hearing about it. But I'm leaving, and I've been thinking about my departure from this physical, this landscape I'm in right now, in this city, and this island, and this country, and this continent, and there are obviously a couple of relationships that are gonna that I have that I'm people that I'm leaving that's going to be really tough. But there is this big network of people, this expansive network of people and relationships, some of which may have started on a, oh, let's collaborate, let's, thanks for doing this kind of way, but as tends to happen even in with colleagues at work, sometimes you have an interpersonal relationship with someone and you're like, oh, this guy's cool, or, she's awesome, like and you develop a more personal relationship with them. I realize that's not going anywhere. That I bring that with me, or that comes with me, and so that's like that's a really interesting thing for me, and I'm actually, in a way, I'm looking forward to. I'm going to be sad because I'm not going to be streaming for probably at least a month, probably about, I reckon, between you and I, it's probably going to be about 6 weeks of nothing, and before the dust settles and I figure out. Get a spot to stream, blah blah blah. But I'm kind of, in a way, while sort of mourning the loss of the ability to just do this when, on the days that I say I'm going to do it, and the some of the losses physically here. I'm also looking forward to just being on the other side for a while in Twitch, and I know that I just know that I'm going to be more of a person in chat because I'm going to have more time to, and I think I'm going to have a real desire to like hang out and sort of still be around, And I realize like there's a lot in it, and it's not just business. It's a lot of things.
No, I think that's a beautiful note, right? Like, whether you're creating content now, whether you have yet to create content, whether you have created content in the past. I know this show is supposed to be called content, right? But
and we've said it 300 times, so we're nailing it today.
But it's like, I think you're totally right. There's something a lot more beautiful on that note of having deep connections, or even finding your own relationship with content, whether it be like the consumption side, or like being a certain, like you said, a lurker in people's chats, or more active in people's chats versus just streaming or whatever have you. Yeah, there's so many multifaceted aspects of this whole internet thing that we're all experiencing. But at the end of the day, for me, much like almost any tool on the internet that I think is intrinsically good, is just the deep connections that you can make, whether it be via collaboration, whether it be by just sitting in chat with somebody. So that to me is like, I love hearing your note on that, whereby I know if somebody were to take a break like yours and then communicate that they do want to come back, I can guarantee you people will, support and turn up and show up for those kinds of things. But also, at the end of the day, like, if that's not the stuff that you're doing in your life at the moment, it is phenomenal to still have an ongoing relationship with somebody who's no longer doing content as well, right? So it's like, yeah, it's such an interesting journey. It's such, I don't know, I would love to see the average like time at which people are content creators versus they're not on a macro trend. But at the end of the day, like you said, as long as you have people in your life to support you, or you're finding solace in other people and other relationships, like, that is the most beautiful thing out of anything. Like, it doesn't matter if we talk about games, it doesn't matter if we talk about like I know we were talking about NFTs earlier, like before this whole thing, but yeah, all of it to me is like, can you make meaningful connections? And like, that's what I'm in it for,
That's beautiful, man. That's it's weird because I have a sort of a tendency towards cynicism, and a tendency towards wanting to avoid these maybe things that may be seen as platitudes. But that said, it's all very true, and sometimes things are true, and I really do feel that way, and I know that you do, and it's just fucking awesome, man. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's great that we can connect on, like, again, I lurk a lot in your chats, right? Violently so, like I mentioned, but it's like, yeah, great that we can jump on these like do an episode of content. It was our first conversation ever, right? And then have a period of time go by, and then do one of these things as well. Like,
Oh yeah.
this means so much more on a personal side rather than like, collaboration business side. And I feel like people who value that, and people who understand that, and people who like look for these kinds of relationships or engagements or whatever have you, I think that's a win-win for everybody, whether it be personal or like external.
Absolutely.
These are a good reminder of that. If you're making good content and you're meeting other people, it's a great time for everybody.
Oh fuck yeah, it's a fantastic time. You just reminded me of a couple of things, and I know we're sort of probably getting towards the end-ish of this thing, but you did remind me of two things. We probably should talk about NFTs because you mentioned being you mentioned a little bit of that before we were recording, and B, we do stream games, and so I got a couple of things I want to speak with you about games really quickly. So let's make the hard pivot.
Hit it.
It's a little late for this question to come up. It's a little late for this question. You shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't ask it in February, but I'm going to. What do you think of the last year in terms of games? What do you think, just in general? What
came out last year? What did I play last year? Searches like 2020. I don't even know. I thought I last year in terms of games, for me, it was a lot of like indie oriented. To be very honest with you, you know what I mean? I mean, like I capped off the year, if I'm not mistaken, or is it early this year, late last year, with Unpacking.
Yeah, I know that one.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if they're in the Melbourne area, but they're definitely Australian. But also like because of the Southeast Asian games, a lot of like indie games that way. So I am probably the wrong person to ask because I did not play when we did the Game Awards. I did a stream with Carrion in August where we all did predictions for Game of the Year, and I'm pretty sure all three of us were chatting in our own separate Discord. It's like I don't think any of us have played any of these games. And it's deeply embarrassing that we're doing a Game Awards prediction. Like I didn't play It Takes Two, I didn't play Deathloop. There were very few games that I played, so I don't know. From a games perspective, I still think it was very indie oriented for me. But I think much like the rest of the world, with the growth of TikTok and like Wholesome Games, I want to give a major shout out to Wholesome Games, which is a project, a company that's just highlighting indie games that are very wholesome. And they've had I think they had a conference last year as well, a presence, and they're really prolific in putting stuff out there. I think indie games is more so where I found 2021 to be.
Do you think that's because the AAA games were just trash? Because I think it was pretty trashy.
I think everybody is so talking about cynicism. Did you think that the AAA games are trash last year? I think they're phenomenal. Like from a technical side of things, from a storytelling side of things, from what I understand about a lot of the games that came out, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's just maybe people have like biases to the types of AAA games that they want to see about it. How do you feel about that whole dynamic?
Me saying they're trash again. I didn't play any of them. None of them. But that's because none of them appealed to me on a level that I'd want to play. Like obviously things that come out that are console exclusives I won't be able to play, but things that come out on Switch and stuff like that, and my PC can actually handle most games. I just couldn't stream them.
There's too much dialogue in the Tales game, so you wouldn't have been able to play the newest one anyway.
What's that?
There's too much dialogue in the Tales.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have played the newer one.
No, I heard the Tales game was good. I heard that Shin Megami Tensei 5 was really good. Yeah. I heard conflicting things about Metroid Dread from people I know. Conflicting, really conflicting things. So the verdict's out on that. I just don't think it was like a landmark year. I don't think it was I think it was, compared to the year beforehand, there's still more games that I haven't played from 2020 that I'm like, oh, I really want to play that, like Ghost of Tsushima, for example. There are more games with Death Stranding that year as well. I think it might have been.
Yeah, Ghost, Last of Us 2, it looks like.
Last of Us 2, Death Stranding.
Final Fantasy 7 remake, Animal Crossing.
Yeah, that just felt like a bigger year. And Hades as well, which I just started playing recently. I have a feeling that this year's going to be bigger. I feel like this is, I don't know, I feel like it kind of goes up and down. Like there's an up year, there's a down year, there's all like loud and quiet or whatever, you know, like I think we're going to have a bigger year. You know, you've got these, obviously Elden Ring is going to be the only thing anyone hears about for the next 6 weeks. Then we're going to got Final Fantasy 16, I think, coming out
No
this
way.
year.
That's not coming out this year.
It's not coming out this year?
I don't think it's coming out this year.
You know,
There's been no announcements on.
It's coming out. It's got to be coming out this year. You don't think so?
I know we have Final Fantasy Origins, that Souls-like game that's coming out in
Oh,
March.
Chaos the game.
Chaos. I don't think they're doing 16 this year. I'm gonna put up my Square Enix hat. I don't have my Square Enix paraphernalia around the set today.
They're not dropping it this year? Oh, well, this year's gonna suck. Fuck
so.
this year.
It's gone. No, but I think I see where you're coming from, and I understand the whole dips thing, right? But I think there's, as somebody who, again, I'm a huge, I guess, like steward or champion of, even if it's a bad video game, there's such amazing, beautiful, talented people working on games. So I think that warps my perception of like what a quote unquote good AAA game is, right? But I don't know. I just feel like there's this narrative of like when people say there's not many good games came out that year. It's like I said, maybe because it didn't speak to you. But when you look at the landscape of games, I think there are always phenomenal, consistent games that are coming out every single year that pushes the medium forward, whether it be through visuals, through storytelling, through maybe back-end tech, whether it be through community building, live service games. So I think that's how I perceive like games within a 12-month period. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So maybe like that's why I find it hard to be like, yeah, even though I didn't play a lot of the games last year, I did not fall in love with the vampire lady from Resident Evil 8 because I did not play that game. But I was like, yeah, but I feel like that's the way that I perceive, benchmarking games as a as a good year or a bad year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's an industry, and you can't. It's impossible it's a global industry, and it's impossible if you have a year where there isn't some things of quality produced. Like the quality of the people doing it doesn't change, but I think projects take time. Like for example, I thought Final Fantasy 16 was coming out, and just I do think that I imagine these studios, these publishers, these developers, I imagine they've got kind of a wide scale idea of what is this year going to be like for our competitors, and how much do we have to do this year to really, like, in terms of wow factor, in terms of like a Breath of the Wild game, a Last of Us game, a huge,
like your landmark pieces for that company or that ecosystem, whatever have you. And I understand what.
I guess that's what last year didn't really feel like anyone was really moving those big like games that people might buy a console because of. You know what I mean, Mike? So okay,
no, I know exactly. No, you're totally right. And on the more like consumer level side of things, and more maybe I don't know if it's more of a casual gamer kind of perspective. I don't know if that's the fair type of guys that you would see that through. But I think you're totally right. Like when you talk to friends, it's like, yeah, like I don't know, Deathloop was like really good this year, but they were like, oh, was it as good as I don't know, like Breath of the Wild, like as a landmark piece of video games or something everybody has to play? Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I kind of agree. But
yeah, and like again, this isn't like the world sucks, gaming sucks, it's the apocalypse, we're all gonna die and never game again and just play Morrowind. I don't mean it like that. Like dude, we've never been with every passing year we become luckier as gamers because nothing disappears and everything's just merely added to the pile, right? Like I have the benefit of having an endless backlog of games that I want to play. I have so much to the point that I just keep acquiring shit, and it's like, why am I doing this? I still got to play this and that. But there's it's I think when you look at a year, like a lot of games sort of attain cult status a few years after. Yes. Like, so a lot of the gems from last year might not be, unless you really go digging, for the average person and myself to some extent, might not yet be apparent. Yeah. Whereas like people are like, oh, you didn't play such and such. Like, oh, that game's incredible. But when it's in this sort of tide of releases and just this overwhelming amount of stuff, like I think I look towards what are the big things coming out, And when people come in and they're like, "Oh, are you going to play Elden Ring?" Like people just always like they're always talking
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
something or other. And I'm trying to like I just don't think that happened last year. And I think that that's like that's a thing that studios are aware of, and I think people are preparing for a bigger year this year. Like I think it's going to be a bigger one. There's
Yeah.
other big things coming out this year. If it's not Final Fantasy 16, what else is big dropping this year?
I know Horizon, the new Horizon game for the
Horizon's
PlayStation.
coming out.
Yeah, I know you haven't dipped your.
No, but I know I've seen a bit. I know they're very
Yeah,
they're very technically impressive open world
yeah.
games.
I know, like, I mean, the new Pokemon game Arceus came out, so a lot of like Pokemon hardcore Pokemon fans.
What do you
I
think
guess
of that? That's supposed to be pretty good.
it's good. Yeah, I played about 20 hours. But I'm also the wrong person to ask because I love every single Pokemon game, even though as much as I criticize them. So I'm
Right.
not the best barometer on those things, but I think it is a great and interesting departure from the formulaic. Yeah,
You can like
and then
catch Pokemon without having to fight them, right? I think that's
yeah,
the thing.
exactly. Or they're like actual creatures that you fear interacting with because
Mm,
they could kill you. So
mm,
yeah, so like you said, but again, I think like you mentioned, I think Pokemon is huge and it's going up there in terms of like public zeitgeist conversation.
yeah.
But I think it still has too few elements going against it to deter it from being that every single person is talking, every single person is playing this game. You know what I mean?
That
I think
you
it's close, but it's not.
that used to
I
be
don't
the
think it's like
case with Pokemon.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It was like an addiction in schools that teachers had to
Oh,
like
for sure.
monitor on their students. You know, like it'd be like kids playing Game Boy in class under a desk and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I
Um,
think it's like I think on this like conversation. No, I mean I'm looking at the list, right? Like the new God of War game is coming out.
that'll be
Breath of the
big.
Wild 2 is rumored to come out. I don't think they actually set a date on it.
Mm,
There's a couple of things like the new Kirby game or Gran Turismo if you're a fan of that and whatnot. But I
mm.
think on a larger note is that the reasons why these conversations are so interesting to me is that what I'm looking forward to in the year. I guess like I'm also kind of like afraid of the reality of having that one game that everybody lionizes because as the industry has grown over the past couple of years, I think a lot more people are finding solace in niches. For example, wholesome games. I love the stuff that the games that they showcase on their platform. They're just like indie games that are wholesome, and like that is the most generic thing ever. But it also breeds a certain type of following and people who love those kinds of games.
Mm-hmm.
When before nobody would watch a wholesome or nobody could curate a whole list of like wholesome indie games, right? So I think it
Mm,
gives more power to niches that might not be your typical AAA Elden Ring Horizon type games.
mm,
And don't get me wrong, I love those games. I play those games. I'm going through the Horizon DLC in preparation for the new Horizon game. I'm playing through Dark Souls before I play through Elden Ring.
mm.
But to me, it's like, why don't we have the why don't people have the conversations around more niche indie games or a niche part of the video games industry, and that is a growing momentum. Or like let's talk about like accessibility in video games in 2021. Nobody talks about that, but like the amount of accessibility options that have been prioritized on developers like schedules or from the top down, and the fact that we had a huge highlight at the Game Awards for accessible video games or games that are prioritizing accessibility, that's huge. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like I think yeah, there's so much more than just talking about the big marquee games in this industry that I feel like is slowly starting to get bumped up in conversation. But I think I'm more fascinated in like those kinds of areas.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think.
Well, because like I said, I know you're like you don't play a lot of the newer games, and that's not a knock whatsoever, right?
Mm.
Like, do you see the industry the same way, or do you think you're consuming and or like maybe the way that you perceive things is still very much like if you don't hear about a game, because like yeah, you wouldn't hear about those games that I don't know
Well,
more niche. I don't know.
I I have an interesting relationship with indie games.
Yes, I know.
I,
Sorry, I'm just thinking about your Blasphemous playthrough, which again, that introduced me to a beautiful indie game, but it was just hilarious to
yeah,
watch you play through that game.
yeah, I have an interesting relationship with it. I, as as a consumer and a player of games, I really like a lot of what indie games have to offer, and I think that is that's where new trends are developed. That's where new ideas are developed that will eventually be sucked into the industry and made
Yeah.
and polished and perhaps abused and destroyed by AAA games.
Yes.
As a creator and as somebody who sort of streams games, I've learned personally for me, because of my community, the sort of brand that I've haphazardly developed, I stay the fuck away from indie games now. And
Mm,
don't get me wrong, the games I'm playing off stream right now are Loop Hero and Hades, though Hades kind of
yeah.
exceeded the indie sort of trope and became a big household title.
What is
Um,
that Resident Evil inspired indie game that came out very recently that you were playing on stream the other day? Like
oh,
that is something that I was like,
Alyssa.
yes,
Alyssa is
yes.
really cool. Alyssa's awesome. And I'm playing that as well off stream. It's, these things speak to me because they speak to
Yes.
my particular niche. And my particular niche is a combination of like, mm, it's a weird combination of like pseudo horror elements I like. I like pseudo RPG elements. I tend to like action based stuff these days. I was more of a turn based guy back in the days, but I still do like some turn based stuff. Uh, I like unique takes, visual styles on
Yeah.
worlds. I don't need massive overproduction, though I do want something that's pretty and has its and knows its style. And so, I've been liking some roguelikes lately. But again, like my niche is none of those things are a specific niche
Mm,
like you say, like wholesome games, right? That could all be categorized. I don't, and I'm not to say that wholesome games are all the same, but there is a cohesive thread between all of
yeah.
them. The fact that they are wholesome in some level. The things that I don't know what the name is for the thread. There's just certain elements that appeal to me, and there's probably like half a dozen or a dozen of them, and those games all have a few of them.
Yeah.
Another one would be the Bloodborne remake that came out recently.
Yeah. That's been blowing up. Yeah, the
That's
PSX.
been blowing up. But what? Oh, you know what I did play last year? This year that I know you're a fan of was What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was a really good one.
What a journey. Jesus.
That was a really good one, and my friend and I played through it, and we've been lately sort of seeking on her Xbox,
Mm,
on Game Pass, seeking these kind of experiences which are one sitting. You sit down for
yes.
4 hours and you play the hell out of it, and then that's it.
Oh my God. Have you played Gone Home? Gone
No,
Home.
no.
It's I played it. It reminded. It's very similar to Edith Finch. It is one of my favorite video games of all time.
Mm,
It's got very similar qualities. You could do it in one sitting, 2.5 hours, I should say,
mm.
about so.
Okay,
But sorry, I just have to interject with like one of my favorite experiences of all time
please
is Gone Home.
describe Gone Home.
It's like it is very like walking sim esque, but it's
Yep.
one of those things where you think the game is a certain way, but the more you find out about you, the more you play the game, you find out it's actually, there are some things that change your perception of the game that goes by.
Mm,
It's very basic. It's I would say on the low budget
hmm.
end. It was made by Fulbright Games. It was the person who did the BioShock 2 DLC, which you can see from the special edition BioShock 2 thing that I have in the corner here. Minerva's
Where?
Den.
Where?
Oh, right here. You can see my giant BioShock 2.
Oh, I was looking. I'm like, they made a Bioshock 2 comic. Okay, now I
Yeah,
see.
no, no, no.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah, he wrote the DLC, and this is his studio project, I think, if I'm not mistaken. After I know
Mm,
him and the studio, and specifically him, there was a lot of like allegations of workplace abuse and a little bit of like gender bias and whatnot. But
mm,
outside of that, I still think that Gone Home is a phenomenal game. So
okay.
do I can't recommend it enough. But on the note, I know I was laughing a bit when you brought up Game Pass. Talk about like macro trends in video games. The fact that you can find these types of games or that these games can kind of exist to an audience with the guise of Game Pass, I think is one of the most things that's happening in the industry.
Mm,
Whereby like, yeah, you can buy Game Pass to play the big $60 games, $70 games, AAA games, whatever have you, right? But Game Pass also gives you the ability to have a bunch of indie games that you would not have otherwise, spent $20 on, $15 on. It's just like at your beckoning, and that to me is the power of like, or where the industry is going. Like you're getting, or it's like very oversaturated of the market where you have so many games to play, but you have so many games to play that all offer different things, and you don't have to pay like $60 for them anymore, right? So that's another quick thing I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, and very different forms of experiences and things that you can consume, yeah, in an evening, almost as if it was an interactive film or something along those lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a part in that game. You know, the part of Edith Finch that I actually found the most moving, I guess, was it was the part about, because for those who don't know, just very quickly, you play a young woman returning to her family home, that seems to be cursed in some way. It's this sort of crudely haphazard and kind of cool structure that keeps climbing to the sky, and you're basically exploring the all of your dead relatives and kind of what happened in their lives. And it's one of the later ones with her. I think it was her brother. It was her brother, and he was working. He was like chopping the. He was working at a fish mill or whatever, or
Yep.
the cannery,
And it
and
becomes fantastical, no?
it becomes fantastical as he becomes absorbed. The blending of fantasy and reality sort of overcomes him, and he just wants to be something other than this guy working in a cannery, this like sort of hero in a video game world. And I found that really, really sad and quite probably relatable to a lot of people nowadays. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool piece of gaming. Just that, even that 20-minute snippet right there.
Yeah, I think like just on that note is that I'm no stranger to telling people that I cry on the internet or crying on the internet, whether it be on stream or whatever have you, right? I get so much emotional like release from indie games more so than AAA games. Like the amount of
Mm,
times that I've cried, genuinely cried or felt an overwhelming amount of emotion from
mm,
typically come from indie video games, which is why I think like I prioritize them as like I would much rather have a conversation about indie video games than the next Horizon game, right? And don't get me wrong, I love both of them equally, but there's just something about it. Like you said, you feel this like, yeah, when you feel overpowered by emotions or the things that really stick with you on a personal level, I feel like come from the indie world. So
mm.
I just want to echo that. Like, yes, that Edith Finch made me feel a bunch of different things, and I'm so thankful for that experience. But on the long term and on the macro side of things, like I want indie studios like that to keep making those kinds of experiences, or a group of devs or a group of people like you and me who played that game and then get inspired to do their own types of games that might elicit those similar emotions. I think
Mm.
that's the power, rather than like joining a Blizzard or an Activision or a Naughty Dog or whatever have you. Which
Yeah.
again, both I'm not knocking on either thing. It's just more so like I'm more excited about that possibility. You know what
Well, no, I do know what you mean. Going back to a conversation we had earlier about the idea of like there being a creative
I mean?
and a business, I
Yeah. Yeah.
do think that the indies lean into the creative, and obviously there's creativity in AAA games, but they're sort of within the context of big business that needs results, and they need this and they need that, and there's a lot of boxes to tick, and they need it done by this date, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And here it actually has raised, I don't want to say my issue with indie games. I can't
Okay.
have an issue with something that only adds, it never subtracts. But perhaps a reason that I will still always look to the big guns, and often dismissively, and often 5 years after the fact. So don't get me wrong, I'm not, you know what I mean. I love FromSoft. I'm not going to be playing Elden Ring next month,
Yeah.
or this month or
I
whatever.
know exactly what you mean. I'm sure the audience members who's watching this knows exactly what you mean.
For me, because of budget, probably because of limitations of smaller teams, I think indie games tend to have to prioritize something, or indie game developers have to prioritize something. In Edith Finch, I think it was prioritizing having a visually beautiful, moving story. That was the priority. In Loop Hero, which I'm playing, they prioritized having, as you might imagine, a very addictive gameplay loop with roleplay elements. Loop Hero doesn't have stunning visuals, and it doesn't have, for me, a compelling story at all. And Edith Finch doesn't have a particularly fascinating. There are cool moments, but it is, you could consider it a walking sim also. And so I feel like they have to go generally in on something, probably just due to resources. And So I do find that, like, if I look to the top of how many hours I've put into something, and again, in like on my Switch, for example, the highest hours I put into an indie game, I think, would be Hollow Knight.
Mhm.
Um, because they somehow nailed I think it's rare for indies to be able to do it. They kind of nailed it all a little bit. Like they got a
Yeah.
fascinating world. It looks beautiful, but they also had good gameplay and addictive gameplay and a challenge. They sort of, but I think that's very rare in indie games. Whereas I think because of the big business element of AAA's, they know that they want to tick all these boxes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they wind up feeling more generic for it, and they don't actually have the, ooh, like you, sometimes you're just like, okay, well, here it is, it's big budget, but I feel like I've done all this before, but they still try to tick every box. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying because a lot of times in the indie world as well, it's like I'm following a lot of like game threads and whatnot on like the indie development side where it's like you have to have your core distinguishing factor of this game or like that like you said that one thing that it prioritizes so that it could differentiate from either the rest of the games within its niche or the one thing that you're prioritizing, right? I think a lot of my issues with indie is that sometimes the games are phenomenal, they're beautiful experiences, and then you go back to their UI or their menus and it's like, come on, man, like this like it's just like a little bit frustrating on that side. Which again, like you said, from a resourcing perspective, like it doesn't matter how your menu moves. Like you're not going to spend your most of the time on the game in your menus anyway.
Mm,
When if you're at a AAA kind of experience, you're experiencing a AAA kind of game. It's like yeah, your maps are going to be fine, your menu's going to be fine. You're not going to think about twice about it. The story is going to be like good enough or whatever.
mm,
But I think you touched on exactly what I was going to say at the end, where I said this on stream a couple of months ago, but I am like genuinely terrified prior to maybe like the past 6 months, I was genuinely terrified of the trajectory of AAA games under PlayStation, whereby Uncharted, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, um, games within that like first party games under PlayStation, they're all kind of the same.
yeah.
Where same like not I'm talking about not like animations or whatever, but like same types of story beats, your same like third person action view, like your set pieces of a segment, and it's beautiful that those teams are learning from each other and they're building off. And I love those games. Don't get me wrong, but a part of me was like, if all games are going to be kind of this AAA enough quality and they're going to feel and look like this, what
Mm,
is the point to growing? Where do we grow the technology or where do we grow games as an industry?
mm,
But then I know PlayStation started to like, they put out games like Returnal, for example, or like I know Deathloop is a PlayStation exclusive, or and they just prioritize Gran Turismo as like part of their state of play. So there is a lot more diversity. But I think on your note of like, yeah, a AAA game might have a lot of that polish and a lot of that consistency, but I'm afraid that consistency might be turning things a little bit more bland and
mm.
templatized rather than innovative.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
and
another
knowing what works, and knowing these, we just people in, people with clipboards going. Well, they probably don't have clipboards. They have a clipboard app on their tablet, going yes, 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 yes. This works. That works. That works. Um,
yeah.
by the numbers, high efficiency. Though I guess it's debatable with how buggy some of these games have been upon release. But by the way, for the record, I don't mind bugs. I enjoy them. They make for fun gameplay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, I kind of like as a consumer, I like where the industry's at, where you've got these two sub industries, AAA, indie, and where the lines are blurred, I don't know. I'm sure it doesn't really end
Yeah.
somewhere and start somewhere else. There's a spectrum, as they'd say. But I like the idea that the ideas come from one and the polish comes from the other. My favorites are the ones that somehow, those rare
You
few
nailed it.
that nail them both.
Yeah, like you said, Hades is, in my opinion, the perfect like middle
Hades
ground
is
there. Like
so good.
Hollow Knight is in that middle ground bucket. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know about. I feel like I haven't played Undertale. I know Undertale is, but again, that's a completely separate. I don't know if you would benchmark Undertale the same way that you would benchmark the two games prior that we mentioned. But yes, there are that bucket of indie games that like this is not what you would think an indie game like. It does not seem resource constrained. It does not seem like it was lack of talent or maybe like a newer indie studio or whatever have you. These are extremely well polished experiences that are for some reason indie games. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a that middle ground bucket is probably the best that indie could offer.
Absolutely. And I'm still waiting for Silk Song. I'm still waiting. But it
Knock
doesn't matter. I don't
on
mind
their
waiting.
offices, man. They're close by, no?
I don't. Oh, really?
Yeah. Are they not? I thought they were. I thought they were in Melbourne. I could be
No,
mistaken.
they're in Adelaide, right? Or did they move
Oh,
to
they're.
Melbourne?
Oh, no. They're probably
Ah, it's all close by. They're around the corner.
not. Closer than me, at least. Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
I don't mind if they take another year. That's totally fine. Just
Absolutely.
get it right, and I think that's what they're really about, and they keep saying we want it to be as good or better, and I'm like, ooh, I like you guys.
I think absolutely, and that's where it comes to like a lot of AAA games that are. That's an overgeneralization, but like you said, bugs in AAA games or whatever have you, it's because they need to meet those deadlines and they have a
Mm,
lot going for them. And I'm
mhm,
not trying to knock as somebody on a professional side that you are supposed to be working with expectations of your shareholders or like the people that are investing in your games or timelines and working. Because like when you're at a AAA studio, you're working with like 300 different companies to get one game out. You know what I mean? It's not like
mhm,
you're working with just one studio. So yes, I understand that. Like, I feel like some newer games on the AAA side have been felt rushed despite their quote unquote polish. I
mm,
know Cyberpunk is probably the most notorious example, but I'd say
mm,
like majority of games they still feel a little bit more buggy than they were in the past.
mhm,
But because you're able to patch them, but like you said, yeah, like there is a thing in indie games where I know in some cases you could have a little bit more flexibility of when you want to polish something and when you don't. Um, but there's so many more multifaceted pros and cons within this particular conversation. So I know I'm generalizing, putting a huge generalization over it.
Oh,
Yeah, if you take all the
that's
time,
all I ever do. Don't worry about it.
yeah, take your time. Whether you're a AAA developer, whether you're an indie game developer, like, yeah, I don't knock people for pushing release dates out or whatever have you.
Just to close, are there any other? You mentioned Gone Home. Are there any other indie games, or perhaps Southeast Asian games that you've played recently that you would recommend to me or recommend to
Yeah.
others?
Yeah, well, I think like I put it on the Gone Home note. It's Gone Home, What Remains of Edith Finch, right, are the most similar. To be
Mm,
very frank with you, the first Life is Strange game is similar in that bucket to me personally as well. So I
mm,
think the trifecta of games that have moved me emotionally to that stage
mm,
are that and probably the set of the Last of Us games. I know they're not like these aren't games that you would recommend within the same bucket or area, but I think those four games I would always mention um, pair very, very well between all of them from a
mm.
storytelling perspective as well. Um, yeah, yeah, but I know you haven't ventured through The Last of Us now.
I actually have it.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to do a YouTube Let's Play of it.
you should.
Um,
You should.
I think it's one that I would prefer to either do off stream
Yeah,
or YouTube it, just because from what I hear of the story experience, you know how it is. You might get involved with Chad, and I feel like I
yeah,
might not experience it in its entirety were I to
yeah,
stream it. But I am definitely considering it. I do have it. Um,
yeah. You should, you should. But I guess like on top of that, like you said, I'm a huge proponent of Southeast Asian games. So I think like for me, it's also just about like upcoming Southeast Asian games, man. There's a game that called After Love EP. It was featured at a Nintendo Direct or a Nintendo Indies showcase a couple months
mm,
ago.
mm,
And it's made by the creator of Coffee Talk. He also had a new game that came out, which was called What Comes After. So a beautiful Indonesian developer. And Afterlife EP kind of looks like this manga style persona-esque experience. And it's also
mm.
set in Jakarta, Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, no shit.
So it's like, yeah, there are some like beautiful, beautiful uh, Southeast Asian indie games that are coming out very, very soon. There's another one that I played the demo of called Potion Permit.
Potion
Uh,
permits.
yeah, sorry, like we played the alpha build of that game a couple months back, and it's also by an Indonesian developer. But it literally looks like I love Stardew Valley. I love that kind of experience, and it is very much akin to that,
Mm.
whilst being a little bit more fantasy or Final Fantasy esque or Dragon Quest esque
Oh, cool.
as well. Um, yeah, no, there's so many Southeast Asian indie games that I'm super super excited for. But I think one that I'd be remiss to mention is also Kena Bridge of Spirits had a huge 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 run last year, and I know it's not a Southeast Asian developed game, but it's a game that's based off of like Balinese culture and Southeast Asian elements. I
Mm,
know it every single time I open their Instagram or their Twitter, it looks like they're winning some form of like best indie of 2021, right?
mm,
And so for me, is I know I love Southeast Asian devs, and like that's my whole mission when it comes to like content creation, highlighting and uplifting those voices. But if like a AAA studio is looking towards Southeast Asian for inspiration for lore or video games or mechanics or whatever have you, music even, like
Mhm.
I think that's pretty awesome as long as they do the culture justice. And from what I understand, I think Kena Bridge of Spirits did indeed do that well. So whilst looking like one of those indie games that should not be an indie game, it's like it should be a AAA, AA or above game.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's my smorgasbord of recommendations.
Well, that's the perception I had of it, just from seeing a tiny bit of it. It was one of those like very polished,
Yeah.
very polished looking games, and
And it's their first game that's come out as well, which is insane.
way to come
Yeah.
out with a bang.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I've written a nice little list here. Arif, it's been a
This has been
joy.
awesome.
It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
It's been too long also, and
absolutely.
we didn't really get around to everything, but we never do, and that doesn't matter. I never do on content.
Yeah, it'd be a dangerous thing if you did.
Seriously, back to the 3.5 hour epics. Before we go, just let us all know, where are you? Where can we find you? What are you doing right now? And what's coming up?
Yeah, I'm on most social platforms as at RF Johan, so ARIEF JOHAN, except for TikTok. Somebody has RF Johan on TikTok, so I'm under RF_Johan on TikTok. And if you want to hear my whole spiel about that, come by to my Twitch streams because I will never not share this story, never not find an opportunity to share this story. Yeah, but I think like in terms of I'm doing a lot of content on Twitch, so I'm still streaming on the regular basis over there, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We haven't played a couple indie games in a while because I've been focusing a lot on Kingdom Hearts 3 and Dark Souls. But very, very soon, I think there's going to be a lot more indie streams there, but also some interesting creative projects that may or may not involve platforms outside of Twitch that involve storytelling or showcasing of games and developers from an indie perspective. So I'm very excited to share some of those very, very soon.
That's awesome.
But yeah, if you guys are looking for like communities that prioritize content, are very, very transparent, or people that try to uplift each other, whether it be from a content creation side, from art side, or whatever have you, I think like you can find me all over those social platforms as well. And I'm also super excited to hear how the move goes on Porto's side. So I will be talking about My Name is Porto profusely over the in his absence.
People hear about My Name is Porto too much. I'm sure they're due a long overdue break.
Nah.
No, it's been a blast, man, and let's do it again soon, and let's try and make it less than 14 months before the next one.
Absolutely.
Though time tends to fly, who knows? We'll blink and it'll probably be there anyway.
I can't wait to see the new set that you call me from. No, this has been a blast. This is like talking about all the positivity in it. It's like I'm very, very thankful to have these kinds of conversations with you, man. And it's like, yeah, just crazy to think that we have this outstanding relationship, despite again being a hard lurk in your streams or like throwing a facetious comment here and there and then disappearing to work and then coming back. It just means a lot that we can have these kinds of catch-up sessions.
Well, like the best friendships, I think, are the ones where there's not where there's an understanding that, like, you can be. I'm a succulent, man. If I'm a plant, I'm a succulent. You don't have to constantly tend to me. Like I like to just be like, oh, I'm back to where we were. Now, where were we?
Exactly.
Like it doesn't. That's how I like all my relationships to be, and
Absolutely.
and that's why I like this one. Thank you guys as well for listening. If you got to this point, you guys are awesome, and enjoy your days, enjoy your weeks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.